Welcome back to the Art of Volunteering. Today, my friend Michael Harder is my guest, and I'm looking forward to our interview. Mike and his wife Teresa live in the Philadelphia metro area and have three grown children and one adorable grandson. He has worked in the Christian nonprofit and church world for over 37 years, including being a local pastor for 34 of those years and president and CEO of a global nonprofit for the last 6 years, and those kind of overlapped. In most of his roles, he has had to manage a volunteer team, whether in the local church, mission field, or Christian nonprofit like the boards he serves on now. He has authored and co authored a couple of books on working with teens and doing regular blog posts for his current ministry. And he travels globally doing training and coaching of leaders around the world and speaking at conferences and events related to his work. Mike, thank you for doing this today. You are such a busy man. I so appreciate that you would take your time out and spend some time with me and my listeners.
Glad to do it for you, Stormy.
That's awesome. All right. Last month, you were like the backbone that you coordinated a conference in Turkey. And from what I understand, everyone who put helped put it together were volunteers. Can you just start us off and share a little bit about the conference and the commitment level of those volunteers to pull off such an incredible effort?
Sure. So my organization is an alliance of multiple mission organizations around the globe. We're in about 150 or so countries, and what we do, what we're all like-minded, the same DNA, the same iOS is organizations, and what we all do is equipping. We all do equipping for church leaders, ministry leaders, missionaries, local pastors, indigenous leaders in the respective countries. And so this gathering in Turkey was a gathering of leaders from those countries around the globe. And we had invited our leaders from, I think 156 countries, and some for various reasons couldn't come, coming from secure countries, visa issues, conflicts in schedule. So anyway, long and short, we had 92 countries, representatives from 92 countries show up, and our target in that was what we call movement makers. So these are people that are not just leaders of organizations, or just leaders of local nonprofits, local churches or mission organizations, but they're people that are actually multiplying and reproducing, investing into other leaders and helping them multiply new movements. We call them movement makers. Does that answer your question? I can't remember what the original question was. Okay.
It does. But tell me a little bit about this is all volunteers. Like I think you were the only
Oh,
paid
yes.
person and you needed to be the backbone. So
Sure, sure.
what type of dedication or commitment do these volunteers have to have? Because this was quite an undertaking. I know you personally have been working on it for 6, 8, almost a year. I mean, several months.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for clarity's sake, I'm a full-time missionary, okay, salaried missionary with the mission organization, and this is my role. So I was a paid staff person, and then I also have an admin. So there were two of us that were a non-volunteer. Um, we did contract out a little bit of work on branding and things like that. Like for our theme was "Be the Sequel." So be the sequel to Jesus and the original disciples. So um, so 260 people there, 92 countries. Um, and I haven't tallied up how many volunteers it took out of that to run it, but I would say probably my guess would be about 70 people in that group had different roles. And they committed to it because they love the vision, they love the DNA, the iOS. They're committed to who we are as an organization, and because we serve them. So we're meeting their needs, but not just their needs, their ministry's needs, and so they're committed to what we're about, and they're willing to put in long hours because of that. So, like we had a our resident historian for our our summit there in Izmir, Turkey, who I never asked him how many hours he put in, but he might have put in 50 hours. He wrote a booklet for us. He put together a tour where we toured the ancient sites of the seven ancient churches of the Book of Revelation, and then a couple of other sites through Turkey. Turkey is like it's the other Holy Lands besides for Israel. Turkey is where a lot of the New Testament happens. Between those two areas, Israel and Turkey. Now, there's other countries that were impacted too, but those are the two kind of the big hubs of where things happen. And so Peter, our resident historian, probably put in 50 hours. Our band leader took time to write a theme song for our gathering, and then he helped put together the team of about 15, 16 musicians and singers, and then he compiled their song list, and he probably put in a couple of weeks of work to it. We had volunteer admins for each region of the globe. So one from Africa, one from Asia, one from India, one from North America, one from Central and South America, and one from Oceania. And I think we had one from the UK too. So, I mean, those are a couple of examples. We had volunteer teachers, volunteer trainers, volunteer coaches that would come along and work with leaders and help them wrestle through different issues. We had volunteer setup crew and technicians and videographers. So a variety of different roles, and also people that coordinated, like when you have 270 people, 260 people doing a tour like that in a conference, it took 6 tour buses, charters to do that. So we had to have a bus captain, and then I say you have to have a sweeper on every bus. So somebody, their job the whole week whenever we're out was making sure people are not getting distracted taking pictures, and then they lose track of where we're at, and we leave them in the middle of Turkey. So you have to have a sweeper, and so their jobs were relatively simple but important. And maybe it took them an hour or two a day, as opposed to Jeremy, the guy who's heading up all our music, that probably took he probably put in three solid weeks plus the week there coordinating his volunteer team. So, but the reason why people do it is because they believe in the mission. They believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and because it's impacted them personally.
I like that. I like
Mm.
that. Now, this segues from there. You have been in several countries, training and coaching, and so you work with ministry leaders, but you work with the volunteers in those countries. Do you find that volunteering looks different in countries outside of the U.S., like way people show up, or their philosophy towards it, or anything like that? Or is it pretty like what we do in the States is what happens other places?
People are people, but culture and the socioeconomic circumstance, and then uh, other issues, kind of factors come into how volunteerism changes from place to place. But probably the biggest distinctive, I would say, and I was talking to a dear friend, Michelle from Costa Rica, that's on our lead team, and asking her this question about volunteerism and the difference. And she's actually a North American that married a Tico, a Costa Rican, and has lived there for a couple decades and has kids there, and is actually a citizen of Costa Rica now. But I asked her the question, "What's the difference?" And she said, "That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it." But her quick answer on it would be the same answer as mine. In a lot of places around the globe, in developing countries, volunteerism, for things to happen, it's a necessity. It's not a matter of whether you want to volunteer or not. Like if people don't volunteer, then the organizations don't happen. It's the truth in the U.S. too, right? In North America and Canada, but in North America, Canada, we can hire an executive director. We can hire a president, like me, to run an organization. I can afford to, by God's grace, hire an admin to help me lead and coordinate a lot of things. But in a lot of developing countries, uh, the leader of the organization, take a church for example. I have a lot of friends that are pastors, that are ministers in local churches, but they're also CPAs or lawyers, or they have a restaurant, or a food stand, or something else that's really where they earn their income. And then the church, as a pastor, they're a volunteer because their church can't afford to pay them. Sometimes it's socioeconomic issues, sometimes it's the size of the church, but the vast majority of pastors around the globe are volunteers, or they're extremely part-time, where they receive a stipend. And that's the case. Then if the pastor's that way, then um, that the people that lead the music at the church, the worship, the people that lead the kids classes and the youth ministry, and the same thing in nonprofits. If it's like a food bank, or a soup kitchen, um, or a community shelter, or anything like that, in a lot of these developing countries, uh, everybody is a volunteer. They like, volunteers are the backbone of the organization. And I think at one point I said something to you in an email or something, where I said that scarcity is the mother of ingenuity, right? And I think that's the case for us too. And most of the organizations that I've been a part of in the U.S. too, volunteers are the backbone, and without them, what we do would not happen. But in North America, yeah, I can, in my organization, I can do some work. I'm paid to do some work. Now I volunteer for a lot of other places too, but I can get some of the work done. If volunteers didn't show up, a little bit would get done. Whereas in a lot of these places, developing countries, other parts of the world, if volunteers didn't show up, nothing would happen, because even the leader is a volunteer.
Right. I appreciate that, because I know in the nonprofit I work for, we're a staff of 10 people. We rely on volunteers as mentors and working in the classrooms alongside of us,
Yeah.
but we're paid. We and that's how we move the organization forward. I can imagine some of the countries where, like I said, everyone is a volunteer, including the pastor.
Yeah.
I I appreciate that. Thank you. So, with that, we've covered a lot on my list. I love it when we have a conversation and questions are just
Sure.
answered as we go along.
Yeah, one of the things I'll say is your uh, prompt in your next question there is that, uh, being in a paid position, I also consider it really important that I volunteer in different places. And my organization has a certain DNA, a certain mission, and we're extremely laser focused. But I have other things that are interest to me. So I volunteer at our local church. I'm one of the elders at our church. I volunteer on a couple of different other nonprofits, like one that does counseling and care for ministry leaders. I'm on the board of that organization, a ministry called Alongside Ministries. I'm on the board of a nonprofit that does equipping in the U.S. called Sun Life Ministries, that equips youth workers and youth ministers. Through COVID, when we were in lockdown, my wife and I and our grown kids we wanted to help. And you remember, and a lot of us probably even listening in remember the just the extreme needs, and especially like we had food in the cupboard, so we were fine. But yeah, moved to the rural areas, or to the urban areas, and to the epicenters of poverty a lot of the time. And people didn't have food. They didn't have the basic supplies. So Teresa and I volunteered for an organization that we have been involved with. We're involved with the initiative that helped birth this organization in Philadelphia called Small Things. and Small Things distributes food to people that are at risk, that are experiencing um, need when it comes to basic human needs of food and medical supplies and basic sanitary supplies. And so we went and volunteered every Saturday during COVID. Had to wear masks, had to get our temperature taken as we went into this warehouse, but it was a warehouse of all sorts of supplies, and we sorted it and then put it into boxes. And then those boxes were so we'd have a box that would be basically food for a week for a family of four or five. And then so that box would be made. And then we'd stack a bunch of boxes, and different organizations throughout the Philadelphia metro area would come in and, according to how many families they were serving in their community, they'd grab 50 boxes or 100 boxes or 500 boxes of these ones that we put together. But Therese and I and our kids, sometimes friends, some of our friends from our small group, our community at our church that we're close to, which Stormy, you're a part of. Some of them came in once or twice and helped out too. But we put those boxes together. So that was a very physical, hands-on type of volunteering that that we've done. We've done that for years with that organization, on and off, probably the last 10 years. But then I serve on boards too, where it's more strategic thinking and supporting the executive directors, the CEO of the organization. So I think it's important, even as somebody that manages and leads, shepherds volunteers, that I volunteer too. And I do that sometimes too much, but yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, you are a very busy man.
Yeah.
So, you and I had talked a little bit about volunteers and getting them involved in your organization and how they become such the greatest advocate for the organization. Can you
Sure.
just talk a little bit about that, like your perspective on that?
So when you volunteer for an organization, like I can write a check out to World Vision or UNICEF or something like that. But if I go into the organization and I actually serve the kids that are being impacted, like I go to Bolivia and I meet with the kids in a village that World Vision or Compassion or UNICEF or whatever the organization is helping them with education and food, and I meet them face to face and I hear their story face to face. It's more three-dimensional. It creates a heart connection. And so I'd say when your greatest advocates are two types of people that have actually been served in the past they've been personally impacted. So if that kid from Bolivia that I'm sponsoring as a compassion child, let's say, if that kid grows up, goes to college, comes back, they're going to be more likely to give back to ministries helping other kids. Like we all know a lot of stories of people that have been impacted by a certain type of thing, and then they go back and they give their lives to it. They volunteer, or they seek out a position in it. They become advocates of it. So if you're impacted personally by it, there's an advocacy that becomes very strong. You become an evangelist for that organization or that cause. And the same thing is true. So I didn't grow up in poverty. Okay, I didn't grow up worrying about what my meals were every day. But if I volunteer for an organization that does that, and I see the people firsthand that experience it, and become friends with them, there becomes a heart connection to them. So those two, I would say, those two types of factors, or those two scenarios, whether you've been personally impacted by it or you've gotten involved in the actual organization and you've seen the impact that it has on people, that creates a stronger sense of advocacy than if, let's say, you're running this ministry with kids and you ask me to give $100 a month to help feed kids and educate them, and you tell me all the stories and show me pictures, and it pulls at my heart at this level. But if you take me there and I meet the kids and I see the impact, and I help serve the meals, and I go into the classroom and I see the teachers, it raises to this level. If I was one of those kids that got helped, then it can be even higher than that. So that's why I say your greatest advocate. It's good to get your advocates not just telling them the stories and showing them um, the impact through video and stuff, but get them involved, even if it's just doing a special volunteer weekend or whatever. It depends on the organization. If you're like I've got friends in India and Mumbai that have schools in the slums there. I could say to you, hey, would you help me start one of these schools? It only costs $18,000 a year. This is true. Okay, $18,000 a year. You can educate 100 kids for 18,000. Pay for the teacher's salary. Give each kid a book bag. There'll be tutors, and it's an informal. It's not a they don't get a degree from it, but what it does is you teach them reading, writing, math, some English and Hindi in this. And what it does is it sets them up that now they've got enough education that they can get into a formal school. Okay. And so that happens from kindergarten up through seventh grade, with tutors helping them too if they're struggling. And it tells the parents, it says to their parents, education is important. They start to see the value of it. Okay. So I can appeal to you and say I need 18,000. So if I get you to be an advocate, and let's say you join in with me, and now we say, okay, each of us, let's try to get 9 families that'll give $1,000. We can raise that $18,000. But now if we take 3 of those families or 4 of those families over there, couples over to Mumbai, and they see it firsthand, they're going to be a lot more likely to become the kind of advocates where they're like, I want to help start another school too. There's a difference when you see things firsthand. It just has a different impact on us when we experience things, as opposed to watching them on the TV or whatever. So
I appreciate that. Like, I just know different places in my life where I volunteered. When I got involved, it totally elevated my sense of responsibility to that organization. Like, I felt committed and a part of it, and my checkbook followed.
yeah, yeah,
Just in general,
right.
uh, with that. So you've touched on this throughout our conversation, but why do you volunteer?
Yeah, why do I volunteer?
Why does
So,
Mike Harder volunteer?
yeah, and I think people volunteer for different reasons, but the main reason, like, I choose the places I volunteer because I want to give back, because I want to make a difference in places that I think matter. So the places that I volunteer are places that I feel like have a um, a long-term or eternal impact on people's lives. And so I volunteer because at the end of the day, the reason why I say I volunteer typically is because, First John says we love because he first loved us. So because I've experienced the love of God, because I've experienced, here we are in Holy Week leading up to Easter. It's Good Friday. And I love because God gave his best for me in choosing to like Jesus willingly died on the cross for our sins. And he conquered sin and he conquered death. He rose again. We'll celebrate that on Easter as Christians. And he gave his best for me. He volunteered for me to impact my life. And so I love because he first loved me. I want to give back. I want to reciprocate. And it's not obligatory. There certainly is obligation in there, but I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I want to, because I've experienced that love, the impact of my life. And it's the same thing in each of the organizations. It's because of the love of God, but it's also because people have impacted me. People have invested into me. And so I want to invest into others in the same way.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We've talked a little bit about this, again, just mixing it through the conversation. Can you share a story of impact, something that you personally experienced as a volunteer or seen as a volunteer leader, or even something that maybe you've been told and you've just kind of been a witness to an impact story?
So the impact of volunteerism.
Sure. Anything, something that you've seen, maybe as a local pastor working with youth, just something that you've seen
Sure.
how volunteering has made an impact.
Yeah, it's a good question. I could share a lot of different stories. Like I think about A young man that grew up in the slums in a city in India that had people, somebody shared love and had compassion on him. He was suicidal as a 16-year-old and decided not to kill himself. He became a follower of Christ and started to serve others. And he's the one that has those schools and has uh, uh, clean water programs in the slums, in these Dhaaravi slums of Mumbai. And he's educating pastors, house church pastors. He's created jobs for women. He's become an advocate. His ministry has become an advocate for women. But that all came about because somebody took time for him. He was the poorest of the poor, a kid that was at the point where, like, his parents had deserted him and his siblings. He was living homeless in the slums, and somebody loved him. Somebody had compassion on him, and because of that, he's leading an organization now that's impacting hundreds of thousands of people across India. So there's that. There's also a young man in Philadelphia that maybe he's not that young anymore. He's in his 40s. He's young to me because I'm in my 50s. But he was a meth addict in Philadelphia, and somebody shared the love of God with him, and it changed his life. It wrecked his life. It changed his life. He got cleaned up, and he started to become an advocate and a sponsor for others. So he sponsors people with addictive behaviors. I also, when I was a pastor in the city, we hired him to help run our mercy ministries in the city, and we took on a project that one of our sister churches was doing called Easter Outreach, where I think they had distributed about 150 meals on Easter weekend to families. And I sat down with this young man, Vito, and said, it started to grow. We were distributing like 500 the next year, and then 1,000, and the kind of number started to grow. And I said, let's make this something that impacts the whole city. Invite other churches to come in and be a part of this, and invite volunteers from all different organizations. And we won't just have our name, the name of our church on it, but whatever community it's in, they can brand it with the name of that church, because we want to tie people to that local community of faith. And that ministry grew. Easter Outreach grew to tens of thousands of meals. And then when COVID hit, all of a sudden it went from a weekend event to an ongoing ministry called Small Things. And Small Things now is, I can't remember how many millions of pounds they've delivered of food in Philadelphia and in the whole metro area. But they're impacting, I mean, the impact is exponential now, but it all started with somebody loving and believing in a young guy, and sharing the good news with him. It was through his becoming a Christian and getting hope and getting purpose that he's leading that ministry right now. I mean, I've seen it in all different ways. I think of a young guy that I took on that was an engineer, and he wanted to get involved and help in the ministry, but said, I'm not really good with. And I was a youth pastor at the time, and he's like, I want to impact and help with teens, but I'm not really the cool guy and everything. I'm like, you know what? You just be who you are, and just what young people need is just people that love them and will come alongside them and create a safe space for them. And so he started to do that, and he became one of my best leaders. He would, he understood middle schoolers, had a lot of energy, and he led one of our middle school groups, and he would take them out and just let them play basketball, and created a space for them to do that. And then he would, they'd have, snacks and refreshments together, and then just talk about life. And through him creating that safe space for a group of middle school boys together, it impacted their lives. It shaped their lives. It took them through one of the most difficult times in life for most of us. A lot of people, if you ask them what was the hardest time growing up, they'll say middle school. But Eric, an engineer who lived a very busy life and had kids of his own, a family of his own, a business of his own, took time out to invest in the young people. So, I mean, that's just three quick stories. Eric, Vito, and Shankar was the first one, the Indian guy. So, yeah.
Amazing. I love it. Okay, here's like my favorite question. Some people agree, some people don't. Uh, can you share a blooper? It doesn't mean something went wrong, but it just didn't go the way you expected it to go. And what did you learn from it?
Interest in volunteerism. That's a good question.
Did anything happen at the conference?
At the conference, things went amazingly smooth. We had to adjust some of the time to little things with like taking 260 people out in buses. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is that when we were distributing meals in the city years ago for that Easter outreach, we would give out a ham that we got from, and I worked with Hatfield Hams, which is a large, or Hatfield Meats, which is a large company in the state of Pennsylvania in the Philly metro area, and they donated a ton of hams and then gave us a bunch discounted, and we got people to pay the wholesale price to give out these hams. So we took a ham, a bunch of canned goods, and stuffing and other perishables, and put them all in a box, and we gave it to a family, and we said, this is the way we're celebrating one of the ways that we're celebrating the resurrection of Christ is to give families and show God's love in a very practical way. And we'd ask people how we could pray for them. And so we were giving out, it depends on what year, 150 or 10,000 meals in the city. But early on in that, as we're going out in the different communities giving these out, this was not uh, as I believe as a Christian, that we should love everybody. Okay, and we should. Um, God's love is for everyone, and as a Christian, I want to extend His love to everyone. So as we didn't give out meals just to Christians. Okay, we gave them out to anybody that was in need. And um, in the Muslim neighborhoods of Philadelphia, Muslims don't eat pork. Okay, just like Jews don't eat pork. So we had to adjust, and then we went to another company and got turkeys. So we gave out in those communities, we gave out turkeys. So it was kind of a blunder in the sense that we had to adjust to meet the needs of the people, to actually share God's love, to share our love with them. We had to say, oh, we're not going to give you a ham because we know you don't eat ham. We'll give you a turkey. So that's the first story that comes to mind on a blooper. I mean, I've had a gazillion bloopers. Um, in one time, I worked at a large church of about, probably at the time, 3,000-4,000 people, and the worship pastor was a good friend of mine, a guitarist. I had actually hired him to lead worship with the youth initially, and I asked him to come along on a winter retreat. We had about 300 kids on this retreat, and I asked him to come along and lead the music. And he was, an intricate part of our church, leading worship for 3 services at this church of 3,000 to 4,000 people. I invite him to come along on a retreat for a few hundred kids. He's snowboarding. He separated his shoulder. He tore his shoulder. It took him out of playing the guitar for a couple of months. So blunder, I messed up the whole church as far as worship and music for that 3 month period, and people weren't happy with me. It wasn't my fault. He was the one snowboarding and doing crazy tricks, but still, I was the one that asked him. So yeah.
I don't know if I can top that one. That's pretty amazing.
I didn't get fired, but yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. All right, Mike, we're at the point of the conversation where I just let you love on your organization of your favorite one. Small things, concentrics, like just love on an organization. Like people should get involved, learn more about them. Uh, just anything you want to share.
Well, like I said, I serve in a bunch of organizations, and I love them. I've given my life to Concentric and to our alliance. Um, J Life in Africa is our alliance partner there, in South in Latin America. It's Singular, and Sun Life Latin America. In Eastern and Central Europe, we have Josiah Venture. In Asia, we have IDN, Intentional Disciple Making Networks. In India, we have Concentric India. We have Rain Ministries in the UK. We have Shift M2M, which is a part of Crew in Oceania in Western Europe. If you're in any of those regions, I'd tell you to look them up and consider volunteering and helping with those different ministries that are having a tremendous impact, and they're all involved down at a local level. The other place I would just say in general is if you're a person of faith, if you're a Christian or somebody that has a Christian tradition, then I'd say if you don't volunteer in your local community, consider volunteering at your church. Ask where you can volunteer there, or ask at your local church where you could help out in the community. Ask them for suggestions. So look for something local. It could be a food bank. It could be a shelter for women and children. It could be an after school program like a boys and girls club. It could be the local YMCA. I have a couple of from my youth ministry days, former students that run YMCA's now. There are all sorts of places to volunteer, but look for a place that's making an impact, that's changing people's lives, change that has the capacity to change the trajectory of their lives, to lift them up out of the ashes, and give them a new start. So there's a lot of places to volunteer. So there's a few that I would mention.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I just want to thank you for spending this morning with us. As you mentioned, we are heading into Easter weekend, so I know there's a lot going on with family and church and um, everything that goes with it. And it's your grandson's first Easter,
That's
so
right.
I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Hopefully, he's doing well. I
Yeah.
just want to thank you for being my guest. I know my listeners appreciated our conversation, and I hope that my listeners come back for our next episode of The Art of Volunteering. Have a great day.